Shalom Rides an Elephant, and a very interesting person who is the author and illustrator of this book, and her name is Jael. So Jael is from Calcutta, and Jael is one of the Baghdadi Jews who lived in Calcutta, and this story has something to do with it. I'm going to ask Jael to briefly tell us a little bit more about herself.
About myself?
Yes.
I'm from Calcutta. My family came to Calcutta in 1796. Okay, that's a long time ago. It was during the time of the British Raj. And whilst I was growing up, there was still about 600 or 700 Jews in Calcutta. Have any of you heard of Jewish people? Yes. There's also a Jewish girls' school here, a Jewish boys' school over here, and we have some beautiful synagogues. So we lived here for a long time, till about the 1950s. Unfortunately today, there are only about 20 members of our community still living in Calcutta. But those who have lived here always look back to Calcutta as home. And their children and their grandchildren come home to Calcutta. I lived abroad for 30 years, but I left Calcutta, but Calcutta never left me. So I came back to live here about 12 years ago.
So Jael, before we start on Shalom Rides a Royal Elephant, Shalom was a great-great-great-great-grandfather, right?
Right. 6 times removed. Great-great-great-great-great-grandfather.
And he was the first Baghdadi Jew to come in.
Exactly.
Yeah? Right. So this book is all the better enjoyed with the illustrations. And I'm going to ask our technical support person to start putting the illustrations up, because we will be taking you through the story. But as the story goes, there is Shalom, and then there is the narrator. Tell us about the narrator, who's a very, very interesting character, by the way.
So actually the book is about Shalom, but it's also about a monkey, okay? The monkey is an imaginary character. His name is Chanchal. And he is somebody I created to tell the story about Shalom. I wanted to have a monkey to tell the story because monkeys are fun, monkeys are curious, monkeys are like us. They're intelligent, they have emotions. And so I thought he could talk about Shalom to us from a very different monk perspective, right? Not a human perspective, but a monk perspective. And so that's why the story is told by Chanchal, who actually becomes the major character in the book, who writes his own story about the Jewish history of Calcutta.
And you know, I read the book, your book, which is actually a history book, very, very heavily disguised. And I thought, you know, if only we had books like this, you know, history books like this growing up. And then I realized it's only possible when people decide to put the story back in history. And we're going to start with the story in a minute, once we have the next slide. So, Jael, this was your story, but this was also your research. But we'll come to all that a little later. First, let's take a look at this picture, and I'd like you to tell us something about it.
So, I did the illustrations for this book as well. And this is a picture which the story starts in Surat. How many of you know where Surat is? Put up your hands. Yes. Where is Surat? Is it far away from Calcutta? Yes. So he first came to Surat because he was from the Middle East, from a country called Syria. Have you heard of Syria? Yes. Which kind of people live there? It's an Arab country, right? So Shalom was an Arab Jew, and he was a trader. And he came from Syria. And the first place he came to was the western side of India, which was Surat. In Surat, there were already a lot of people who were Jewish living over there. It was an important trading community. But the year was 1792, and the British had just about established their hold over India. And so from Surat, he decides to come to Calcutta. But this picture is still in Surat. Can you see Chanchal over there? So Chanchal is looking from a high treetop at the Arabian Sea, which is blue-black in color, and he's watching the dolphins jump and dive. And suddenly he sees, oh, there's a ship coming in to the port. And he's a very clever monkey, and he wants to know all that's coming in and out of the port. So he looks at the ship from far away and decides what his next turn will be.
So as we move on in the slide, there's a next one which has Shalom dressed in what was then, I suppose, customary attire. So tell us about Shalom, what he's wearing.
So this is Shalom, my imagination of Shalom. In 1792, they didn't have photography, and in real history, Shalom leaves a diary, but we don't have any photographs of him. So I imagine my ancestors, this very handsome young man at 32, who's very regal. He comes to Surat on this ship, on a sailing ship, and he's wearing an Arab turban and a beautiful gown. And because he's so handsome and so elegant and his gown is so different, it catches Chanchal's eye. And Chanchal wants to become his friend. He thinks, if I make friends with this man who certainly looks rich, does he look rich? Yes? Why do you think he looks rich? Huh? From his attire, right? Lovely clothes and his jewelry and his brooch. So Chanchal's a clever monkey, and he thinks, I want Shalom to be my friend.
And of course, then, to make sure that Chanchal catches Shalom's eye, she has to do something. And, you know, art and culture, we're in a cultural space. And so Chanchal decides to do a dance. And we'll talk about that. So the next slide, please.
So there's Chanchal. Your second time seeing Chanchal. I told you he's the most important character. What's the dance of Gujarat? Does anybody know? Right. So he is from Gujarati monkey. He lives in Surat. So he decides, I have to woo Shalom. How am I going to get his attention?
Oh, I thought Chanchal was a girl?
She's a girl. How am I going to woo him, woo Shalom? And so Chanchal decides she's going to do the Dandiya Ras. And she's learned from the monk gurus of Baroda this fabulous dance. And she jumps down from a tree while he's sitting with his friends, and she performs this dance, and he is mesmerized. What a beautiful dance she performs. And then she goes up to Shalom and introduces herself, and she decides from then on, she and he are going to be thick friends, and she is going to teach Shalom all about India, all the things he needs to know to be a successful trader and businessman.
And Shalom, of course, adores Chanchal. And then he decides to move to Calcutta with all his possessions, his ships, and his monkey. I mean, because now she's become a part of his household. The thing that we always want to also understand at this point is why he chose to move from Surat to Calcutta at that time in history.
So Surat was a very rich trading post in the Indian Ocean. But the center of gravity in terms of economics was moving because the British were a powerful trading empire. So Chanchal thought, Shalom thought, if I move to Calcutta, I'll have many more business opportunities. And so he moves to Calcutta. This is a picture of Calcutta when he first moves there in 1790s. Wasn't it a beautiful city then? Yeah? And not so many people in those days. And so he moves here and he sets up his business. And he is a trader in gems and jewels and precious commodities and makes a lot of money.
The book has, of course, more illustrations, and the more I look at it, the more I love it. There is this bit which your pictures don't have, which is Shalom marrying this beautiful, beautiful young woman. And I know it's not part of this, but if you just tell us a little bit about her, she must have been your great, 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 great,
Yes.
great grandmother.
Her name was Najima. And basically, when Shalom comes to India, this is not in the story, he actually had a wife in Syria. People were allowed to more than one wife in those days, all over the Middle East. And Jewish people followed the customs, conveniently,
India
of the
too at
land
that
that they're
time.
in.
India too.
India also, they had more than one wife. And when he sent for his wife to come out to India, the father of the girl said, if you line the road from Syria to Calcutta with pearls, I will not send my daughter. Because India seemed very far away for a nice Jewish girl to go. There weren't that many Jews in India. So when he was in Surat, his business partner had a beautiful daughter. Her name was Najima. And Najima used to dress in boys' clothes. She used to wear a turban, so everybody thought she was a boy. So she could roam around publicly, because in those days, women had to be indoors. We were Arab Jews, and so they were sort of like very conservative. So this girl, in order to go out, used to wear a turban. Anyway, I'm sure Shalom met her when she wasn't in disguise, and he married her. And then his wife's family sent out his wife too to come and settle in India. But unfortunately, she lived a short life. She died in childbirth. So Najima became his main wife.
Moving on from this particular slide, there's a description of his home in Calcutta, where he kind of sets up house. And of course, what we've missed is the image of the tigers, because at that time, when Shalom would have landed, Calcutta as we know it, I mean, would have been a much smaller city. And there were tigers all around, because Sundarbans extended all the way up to Kasipur. So he would have entered a city which was surrounded by jungle, surrounded by tigers, right?
Right. And so it was lovely for the monkey, because he could have lots of jungly fun in the jungles with his friends. But this is a different picture. Once he came by ship to Surat, and he had to travel overland, by carriage, by horse, by river, because we didn't have the whole railway network and everything that we have now today, certainly no planes or anything like that. So he used to be a trader, and he used to trade to different places, and he had to go up to see a Maharaja to sell him some jewels. And on the way, he stopped in Benares. And Benares has a very famous monkey temple, the Durga temple. Have you heard of the Durga temple? Anybody heard of it? Put your hands up. Yeah. So he goes to the monkey temple because he thinks he'll have a lot of fun with his monkey friends over there. And so Shalom goes to Benares, and the monkey leaves him and goes visiting his friends in the Durga temple. And here you can see he's having a lovely time with his friends, swinging on the temple bells. Ding dong, tick tick. He's having a great lot of fun with them.
You know, Chanchal has she has her own language. I mean, she uses words like Mankaguru, Mankalicious. And I wanted to ask you how you thought of the words.
You know, I know that children and adults too love different sounds. So I think all the different sounds I could use, and play with the word monkey to give him a very human character. So he's always talking. This is a very talkative monkey who also knows how to read and write. So he's as clever as all of us human beings, right? And he writes his own chronicles about life in that time. So I tried to tell the story of a period in time through this very fun character.
So when you delve into history, of course, next slide, but we'll talk about a little bit about how Jael went about writing this. So, you know, all the information that you have, this is from Shalome's diary that Jael had. And she decided that this story needed to be told. And the diary was the source material. And of course, because Shalom had a diary, Chanchal had to write her own diary. which became Shalom Rides a Royal Elephant. And in that diary, among other things, Chanchal, because she was new to all of this, would record food. And here's a painting of her eating baklava.
Yes. So basically, everybody here likes sweets? Have you ever tasted a sweet called baklava? Okay, so baklava is a sweet from the Middle East that people here now have too. It's made with honey and dates and pastries. And so Chanchal gets to eat all the food that Shalom and his family cook. So we get a chance to eat delicious food as we move along his tail. And here, all the monkeys love him because during weddings and in festivals, Jewish people used to send trays of sweets for the occasion. You sent trays of sweets, the best sweets, before he was too old and his teeth were hurting and he had dentures and he could no longer eat. But he's remembering his good old days, remembering the good food and the good times that he had with Shalom.
And as the story goes on, Shalom ages, and as Shalom ages, Chanchal also ages, but they're clearly a pair. I mean, it's a great partnership, as she says. And of course, being a monkey, Chanchal has a few regrets. I mean, her point of view is, everybody's talking about Shalom's diary, but it's actually, and his adventures and his business, but it's actually ours. I mean, we're equal. I love that because, here he is riding a royal elephant, which we'll hear about, which is where the title comes from. And Chanchal is very much there too in the whole story.
Right. So this is the story when he goes to meet the Maharaja who lives in Lucknow. So you see the minarets and the beautiful city Lucknow was. And because he was a Diwan, he was a court jeweler, he had the honor, Shalom, of riding the royal elephant. But Chanchal finds out to his dismay that the monkey is not allowed to ride with him. And he can't believe it. So he goes to the elephant shed and he checks out with the elephants. Is it really true that only Shalom can ride the royal elephant? How about me? But instead, he has a wonderful time with the elephants who tell him even more amazing stories about their life as royal elephants.
When you wrote this, Jael, I know you wanted to tell a story about the Jewish people. And you chose this wonderful way of doing so with pictures and with a children's book. What went through your mind? What was your reason to do it? And how can we do the same, all of us sitting here? I'm sure we all have personal stories of our family. How do we go about it?
So I wanted to tell a story about the Jewish community, and I've written several books about my community, but I never wrote about the first settler whose diary actually I don't have. It's in a library. It's a very famous diary because it's the diary of the first settler, and it's written in Judo-Arabic. It's written in a language called Hebrew. Hebrew is the language of the Jewish people, but he was an Arab Jew. He lived in Arab lands for many, many years. So the Jews would write Arabic in Hebrew script. So this diary is not easy to read because it's a language now that not many people know. However, there's a summary of the diary which had a lot of the highlights. And I used that and I thought, Chanchal is really interesting because his Shalom, his friend, is really interesting. He rides a royal elephant. He goes up to Punjab to weigh the Kohinoor diamond. He travels as a trader across India. He sees so many new and wonderful sights. He sees British India. He sees Dutch India, Chinsura. He sees so much happening. And so I felt if I tell this story, I can use all the colorful parts and tell this story so that everybody will understand it. Children will enjoy it, but adults will enjoy it too because it's filled with history, which is storytelling history. So I wanted to tell all of you young people who are here, when you go home, you have a long weekend coming, catch hold of your grandma and ask her to tell you a story about her life or her grandfather's life or her grandmother's life and get the details and write a little story and then see how you can make it interesting and exciting and keep it and share it with all your family because that's a wonderful gift. So I also have a grandson who's 4 years old. And I wanted this story to be a story that he will love when he's a little older and know about his family and his tradition, and for my children and grandchildren to know the story as well.
When we are in school and when we're even in college, we often think history is about the big and the famous people. But history is far more about ordinary people, our lives, as it happens. And we're beginning to realize that now. And more of us are looking into our family stories, are going back and talking to our grandparents, our parents, our great aunts, to know about the times we lived in. Because that is another kind of understanding, not just how the rulers lived, but how ordinary people lived. And this is, we'll sort of open it up to questions in a bit. This is a picture of you, Yael, in...
This is the cemetery that we have in Calcutta. I told you the Jews have several landmarks. We have synagogues, we have schools, we have a cemetery, we have some famous buildings. So this is my ancestor's grave. And you'll see it's a very simple cemetery. All the graves are white because we are buried, unlike Hindus. And we believe in our faith that you come and you go very simply, from dust to dust. So everybody's grave should be like the others. So though Shalom was a settler and a very wealthy man, his grave is like the others there. And that's me standing beside his grave right here in Calcutta. Should I do a bit of reading, one lady?
I think so. I think now we'll just get into the book a bit, because we got so carried away with the pictures and it was just all so beautiful, and the sun started shining. So I'm going to hold on to this. Yeah. So here's a little bit about the book, a little bit from the book that Yael will read.
I'm going to read this section. I won't be able to hold and do it.
I'll hold the mic for you. So we're going to start in a bit.
Okay, and there's one more slide, I think, of the Nawab and the battle scene. It's not here. When we reached Lucknow, Shalom met Nawab Ghazi Uddin Hyder, who placed a robe of honor on him, and Shalom was appointed a court jeweler. Lucknow was a stately city with many splendid buildings and palaces that had domes and minarets. There were many mosques. Dhum, dhum, dhum. My heart was pounding with pride. This is Chanchal speaking. I took my place among the kings of the land. My heart almost stopped beating when Shalom was honored with a special title of Wazir, meaning advisor to the king. Shalom should hold a ceremony and give me that title. After all, I have been his advisor for years, I told my friends. When we were in Lucknow, we lived in a very large palace, even grander than our home in Chinsura. It was opposite the house of the British resident. Our garden had fountains and many large fruit trees. I could climb a different tree every day, and it was like going to a different cafe each day. The Nawab told Shalom that we could stay at this splendid place for as long as we like. At Lucknow, Shalom rode an elephant alongside the king, which is a special honor. I was so disappointed when Shalom said I could not ride along with him. The first day this happened, I wailed and cried and could not be comforted. Then tick, 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 my brain started working so fast, it whizzed, whiz-a-doodle-doo. I would meet the royal elephants and find out for myself why I was not allowed to ride in the procession. I would speak with those magnificent gray creatures that had such big ears. They were almost as big as me. The ears that had flowered designs on them made with colored chalk. And the creature had the longest nose I had ever seen. It stretched from his forehead to almost sweep the ground. I found my way to the elephant stables. Should I stop there?
Okay. I noticed you were all mesmerized and listening, as was I. I'm going to now open up this session to questions. We have 15 minutes. So raise your hands. There's someone with a mic who'll reach you. Lots of hands. Fantastic. Shall we start with the lady in green here? Yeah. Yes, you. Hello. Second row next to your teacher, I think. Yes. Yeah.
Good morning. I am Saharin from DPS Howrah. I wanted to ask you, have any of the characters that you've created ever had an impact on you personally?
Um, I am writing a story that starts in 1792.
Yes.
Now, 1792 is a long, long time ago, right? I'm old, but I'm not that old. So I never met any of those characters, but I heard about them through my family history, which is why I ask you to go home and record your history so your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren may not know about your great-grandmother, but they'll know from you what they were all about. So I didn't know them personally, but we are a community whose values that my ancestors gave me are very much alive today. So I don't know them personally, but they still inform my life, how I live my life.
Thank you.
Okay, the lady in blue, which school is that? Yeah, introduce yourself.
Good morning. I'm Adrija Das from Mahadevi Birla World Academy. So my question is like, what made you narrate the story through a monkey? You could have given other characters also, and like suppose if it was a bird or any other character.
Oh, that's such a good question. Thank you for asking me that. Actually, I went through many characters. First, I thought it could be a bird and he would fly over and see everything. And I said, well, the bird would have an overview, but less intimate in conversation with him. And then I thought about a horse, because I thought the horse would ride along them in a carriage and they'd go from place to place. And I think in my subconscious, my father had a pet monkey. And I don't have the picture here. I will include that in my next slides. And maybe that impacted me. And then I thought, wow, a monkey. He's such an Indian character. Monkeys are so much part of India. Monkeys are so funny. They're so naughty. You know, they're so much fun. They're curious. And this monkey also plays tricks on him. Now, I can't imagine a bird or a horse doing a Garba dance. Can you? Or the Dandiya Das. Can you imagine a monkey dancing? Yeah. Can you imagine a monkey, horse climbing a royal elephant and going to beat the elephants? But you can't imagine a monkey, right? So I wanted a monkey because he's so much like us, because actually we were monkeys once, right? So I wanted us to have that idea that we're not so different from the creatures around us.
Fantastic. Now I would, yes, you're in a gray blazer. Which school? Yeah.
Good morning, I am Shlok Roy from Billa High School. So my question is that why did Jews come from Syria to India?
Okay, that's a very good question. Thank you for asking that. Actually, people have traded in the world for thousands of years. Now we talk about globalization and these big words, but we've always moved and we've always traded with people from across the world. In those days, people mostly traveled from other countries by ship, okay? And we've had Jews and India have traded since the time of the Bible. King Solomon, right, had sent goods to India, and India sent goods to the Queen of Sheba. So we've always had trade. So Shalom was a trader, and the reason he came to Calcutta is, Calcutta at the time, the language of Calcutta, was it Bengali? Do you think? English, the official language was Persian. And he knew that language because he came from the Middle East. So it was comfortable for him to come and settle in Calcutta. And in those days in Calcutta, and I talk about it in my book, they were Chinese looking for opportunities, Portuguese, Dutch, Danes, and so many other Armenians, Jews, all coming to Calcutta to seek their fortune because Calcutta was becoming a major center for the British and was one of the richest places in the world. In fact, Murshidabad was the richest place in the world in the 18th century. So there was a lot of opportunities here.
Right, you've got your hand up for a bit, the lady at the side. Can you stand up? Yeah. Please introduce yourself and your school.
Ma'am, I'm Teesta Chatterjee from the Heritage School. Ma'am, my question to you is, ma'am, how did you come across Shalom's diary and how did the idea come to you that you wanted to turn it into a story?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking me that. I actually know a smattering, very little bit of Hebrew. I don't know Arabic. I know English, some Hindi, some Bangla, but not much. So I actually learnt about this diary. It was in history books about the Jewish community, but my brother and his son were doing a lot of research on the diary and were getting it translated in America and in Israel by scholars who knew this language. It was Hebrew, Arabic written in Hebrew. And so I got interested again in the story that had put aside for a long time. I looked at it again, and I looked at the highlights of the diary. And there are many highlights which we haven't talked over here, because he was a very interesting man in terms of what he did, what he knew, the values he taught. And he was really a discoverer. For his community, he discovered a whole new country, and not only India. Eventually, the Jews of Calcutta went all the way to Shanghai, Burma, Malaysia, Hong Kong. They lived in all these places. So I thought, why don't I write about this diary? Now, if I write an academic paper, I used to be a professor a long time ago, I didn't feel like doing that. I'm kind of courageous, and I thought, wow, let me just try and write a children's book. And somebody yesterday, a wonderful screenwriter, said, after 10 books, he dared to write for children. Because for children, you have to write very clearly, very simply, and tell a layered tale. And if you can write for children, then you've made it. So I thought, let me try also and write a book for children, because you all are actually an audience who is very incisive, who know what they like and enjoy. And that's why I decided to make it through children to tell this story.
Okay, I'm going to come back to the front before I go back to the back. You've had your hand up for a bit, so can you stand up, please? Yeah. Mic. Can you give her a mic?
Good morning, ma'am. I'm from DPS Howrah, and I wanted to ask you that how did you feel after discovering India's different and diverse heritage while you were illustrating in your book?
You know, India is such a rich and diverse country, and with Shalom, I was able to travel to a lot of parts of India, especially northern India, though he also traded with the south. And so what I realized, India is a land of color, right? Everywhere you see there's color and there's beauty and there's trees and there's water. It's not everywhere, I mean, especially in Bengal. There are dry parts of India as well. And so I realized that the illustrations have to be as colorful and as glorious as India was. So I went wild with my paints, and you can see I used a lot of gold, because gold also is something we use in decoration. So I think the colors of India, I tried to bring them into the illustrations.
Right. You. I'm trying to, Yael, I'm trying to get in as many questions as possible, because people are bursting with them. Yes, please. Go on. Yeah, both of you ask. Ask your questions.
So my question is, like, why did you want to name your book Shalom Rides an Elephant when you could have chosen to so many names, to choose so many names? You elaborated on the Kohinoor Diamond, Surat, Gujarat's Garba dance. Why would you want to name your book what you named?
Very good question. I had lots of ideas for the name, but I wanted the name to say two things. I wanted Shalom as a Jewish name. I wanted people to understand it's about Jewish people. And a royal elephant, when we think about elephants, which country do we think of? India. So I wanted to put both Jews and India in the title, and I thought it was a fun title that I thought would attract children. How many of you like the name Shalom Rides a Royal Elephant? Okay, so that's why I chose the title for the book. I thought it would attract young people.
You can go next here.
I'm Hiba Mustaja from MBWA. So my question was, when you're writing on children, like when you're writing children's books, there are a lot of things you can write on. Like why did you choose family history?
Because I knew my family history, and I knew it was a story that people hadn't told. Now, I usually write about women, because I'm a feminist, and I teach in women's studies. So this is the first time that the book is about a man, which is very unusual for me. I usually write, as I said, about women. So in order to balance it, I made Chanchal the girl and made her the main character.
And I think it worked beautifully. And there's, of course, we haven't put all the pictures up there, but there's one of Chanchal in a ghagra choli, which is absolutely adorable. I'm going to take some questions from the back. We have some time still. I've asked a lot of girls. I'm going to be a little fairer to the boys. You've had your hand up for a bit.
Ma'am, why did you write on Shalom only? Like, your family has a long history and you can write on anybody else who also had adventures like Shalom.
Well, that's a really good question. I have written about my family in many books for different audiences. This is my 4th book about the Jewish community. I chose to write about Shalom because in my other books, I write about later periods, about people in my family. And this one is the first settler who came in 1792, and I've never written about this period. So it was a chance for me to explore a different time in history when the Jews first came. And I thought people in Calcutta may not know that Jews first came so long ago and lived in this country.
Okay, at the back there, the school at the white shirt, yes, the girl in the white shirt. Yeah. I meant you've had your hand up.
Ma'am, are there any other types of books like this which you have written?
This is my first children's book, so I think this one would be of most interest to you. When you're a little bit bigger, maybe you'll like to read my other books, but I think this one would probably be nicest for people your age right now. But I have written other books.
So I've got time for 2 more questions, and I'm going to be, I'm trying to be as fair as I can possibly be. Yeah, the gentleman, hello. Okay, she's not interested. If you've not asked a question before, could you, could you just give the mic to her? Yes. Yeah.
Good. Good morning. I'm Nishta from Loreto Day School, Dharamtala.
Right.
And my question to you was, since your story is based off of history purely, have you incorporated any part of your own personal life, your own personal touches, your personality into the book?
That's a great question, and I'm a Loreto girl too, so hurrah for Loreto. I'm glad to see Loreto people here. Hurrah! So in terms of, I think I put my perspective in this book a lot, because in this book I also want people to know, and Chanchal, who's a girl, is very wise. So she talks about how important it is for different communities to live together, how they all prosper, how they can learn from each other, how we can, monkeys can learn from humans, how humans can learn from monkeys. So for example, she thinks these humans, they don't even realize how smart she is, that Shalom is not teaching her about astronomy, but she wants to learn about it. So she's curious, and she also learns from Shalom, because the Jews were very philanthropic, which means they gave a lot in charities, to schools, to educational institutions, medical institutions. And Chanchal says, oh, I can teach my monkeys about doing social service, because we don't do so much social service in our monkey kingdom. So I try to bring my own perspective and values through Chanchal, and through her dialogues and through her imaginings.
Shalom talks a lot about giving back.
Yes.
Yeah, could you just tell us a little bit about it?
So like many traditions, we always have to, if we're successful, we must always give back to society. All of us have a responsibility to not only take, but to give. So for example, there's one scene where a Muslim gentleman, Shalom wants to create a cemetery in Calcutta, and he goes into this jungle area, and he needs to create a cemetery, and he needs a large space. And there's a Muslim gentleman who's a friend of his, and he says, I can give you this large space. It was the outskirts of Calcutta. You can use this as a cemetery. And when Shalom takes the cemetery, he gives the gentleman his best ruby ring, because he's a jeweler. And Chanchal is very upset. He said, that's my favorite ring. Why did you give it to him? You didn't even ask me before you gave away that ring. How could you do that, Shalom? And he throws a monkey tantrum. He doesn't like it. And Shalom lets him calm down. And he tells him, whenever we take, we must always give back, because that is our duty both to individuals and to society.
Thank you. One last question, Jael, before we finish. This is just, I wanted to ask you that question. Can you stand up, please? Yeah, sky blue shirt, yeah. You've been, yeah. Can you give him the mic? Yeah. He's been like desperately.
I'll take questions from you all afterwards if you come up and talk to me.
Good morning. I am Orkajyoti Roy from Birla High School. My question is that, why did you only choose a scene, Shalom rides an elephant, and not the other scenes like from Benares and all? Why did that scene specifically inspire you?
Well, first of all, I think it's lovely to ride a royal elephant. How many of you have ever ridden a royal elephant? You have? Where did you ride a royal elephant? No, you didn't ride it. You rode a royal elephant? Where? Oh, in Kaziranga, but that wasn't a royal elephant. Did it belong to the king of Kaziranga? No. So many of us have ridden an elephant, but very few of us have ridden a royal elephant. You saw the picture, how beautiful he is, with his beautiful trunk all designed and wearing wonderful fabric, and he has a place to sit on the top. So I thought it was just a very unusual place for a person to sit. So I wanted to draw attention by something that would catch your imagination, and so I chose that as the title.
Now, we're coming to a close. I'm going to say bye, but for you, it's not the end, because Jael will be signing copies of Shalom Rides a Royal Elephant at the bookstore. And if you want a copy for yourself, just head there, make a line, and you can get it signed by the author herself. I must say, I enjoyed it thoroughly, because, you know, it was like the best history lesson I'd never had.
Thank you. And before I go, if there's a lot of you had more questions, I'll be here for a few minutes to take your questions. We can sign the books later. Okay?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Wow, that was one session which I think people will be very happy that they've listened to this. Thank you so much, Jael. Thank you, Jashodhara, for moderating the session so well and asking such wonderful questions.